Ready to get it cracking? Ready to get it cracking? Okay, we're all ready to go. Let's do it. Make sure you guys give this shares, everyone watching, especially on the replay. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome into another episode of A Nichols Worth. Your host, Keaton Nichols. You can catch me everywhere like you see it on the screen at Keaton D. Nichols. If you're watching on Instagram, then you're probably already familiar. At Keaton D. Nichols on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook as well. Let's be friends and let's talk about some stuff. Happy Wednesday to everyone out there. We are back. Officially, this is a We Are Back show. So I'm excited about that. The last 2 days, let's see, I was pretty busy. I have totally legitimate excuses as to why I was not there on Friday. Of course, I was celebrating a great friend of mine who got married in West Virginia. I was happy to see that. It's good to see that people are continuing to live their lives. That love goes on. It's great to see. Now it was a fantastic show, fantastic ceremony. So that was great to be a part of on Friday. And then of course on Monday I just celebrated my birthday, kind of an important one, my 30th birthday. So I do want to shout out, of course, all the people that said happy birthday and all that other stuff. Even if you didn't say happy birthday, shout out to you, because now you know. But anyway, it was a pretty big birthday, the 30th birthday. So I'm ready. I don't fear anything about that 30th birthday or anything. A lot of talk and a lot of conversation about what turning 30 would be like. And I really legitimately kind of felt like I'm like older and wiser now. Doesn't mean I'm smart. It doesn't mean I'm wise. I'm sorry, but I am wiser, I should say, than I was in my 20s. Had a lot of experiences and it helped shape me into the person that I am. But the cool thing about my 30s is, especially for this generation, and maybe this is a conversation we'll have on After 10, our conversation series. Of course, more details on that coming up. But getting older for our generation, older, quote unquote, I think has meant different things, than certainly than it has for our parents' generation or some of our older siblings that might be in their upper 30s, or I'm sorry, lower, upper 40s rather, mid 40s, etc. Life is a little bit different. The goals and the timelines a little bit different for millennials when you're turning 30. So it's definitely something I'm open and willing to talk about. So keep your eyes open. It'll be definitely one of the topics on After 10. Anyway, looking forward to my 30s. It's going to be great. Shout out to everyone who was in on that. Anyway, so I missed 2 days worth of news. In actuality, we do this every other day, so it's kind of like missing like 4 or 5 days if you factor in the weekend. So there are a few things that happened that I do want to talk about. Before we get too deep into the mud, make sure you give us a share on your timeline. Make sure you subscribe, all that other good stuff. A Nichols Worth. YouTube, probably the best way to check us out. You get to comment and see what's going on there as well. And shout out to, of course, our sponsor, Parkour Therapy, for sponsoring today's episode as well. We'll have a little bit more on that. You want to stick around at the end for our summer challenge. It's going to be pretty dope. So parkourtherapy.com. All right, so let's get into the news that I missed. I do want to talk about Major League Baseball and their decision to remove the AllStar Game from Atlanta. But first, I did see a story over the weekend that kind of caught my eye, and it reminded me of a segment that we used to do on the radio in Philly where we would talk about all things STEM related: science, technology, engineering, math. We would also talk arts. It was all inclusive in this one as well. But it reminded me of the kind of conversations that we used to have then. And I wanted to mention this as a part of today's podcast to just make sure that people are staying aware of this kind of thing. Now, this is a story that was released a few days ago in Business Insider. Let me get exactly how many days so I'm not making things up. April the 3rd. There we go. Anyhow, and it involves Facebook and data. Surprise, surprise. A user in a low-level hacking forum on Saturday published the phone numbers and personal data of hundreds of millions of Facebook users for free. The exposed data includes the personal information for over 533 million Facebook users from 106 countries, including 32 million records on users in the United States, 11 million users in the UK, 6 million in India. It includes information like their phone numbers, Facebook IDs, full names, locations, birth dates, bios, and in some cases, email addresses. So stop me if you've heard this one before, right? Facebook data breach. Um, they say that this particular breach was created by basically exploiting that like contacts in your phone may match contacts on Facebook type of feature. When you first get a Facebook, and lots of other sites have this feature too. I'm sure you all are familiar with it, but they have a feature that basically says, if you give us your phone number, if you allow us to search through your contacts, as a matter of fact, they don't say it directly, right? But if you let us search through your contacts, we'll connect you to people that you possibly know. And this is especially a helpful feature if you're new to social media platforms just in general. You may not have built up a reserve of friends on Twitter, let's say, or I don't know, whatever other sort of social services people are using. You might not have really built up that repertoire. If you're getting to Facebook, you're just now getting to Facebook, right? So seems like a convenient feature. Let us look through your contacts real quick. We're not going to share your number with anyone, which is true. They didn't publicly, right? But we're not going to share your number with anyone. We just want to know who's in your phone book to see if it matches up with the phone numbers already within the Facebook database, so to speak. So there are a number of ways to skin this cat. And by skin this cat, I mean there's a number of ways to steal your data and your information. Now, why am I talking about this? Like, why is this important? Because your data is, as a former co-host of mine on our program used to say, data is currency. Everything that you give in terms of your information, it can be used. It's valuable, I should say. And I say that not so that we clamp up and shut down the computers and we don't trust anyone involved or anything else like that. I don't say that to drive fear into us, but we should understand what the value of the information that we give on social sites and social platforms truly is. It's not just general information. A few years ago, the Cambridge Analytica scandal happens. I always pretend that, not portend, but I always contend rather that this was by far one of the most impactful and important stories that has happened, in recent, not just political memory, just news, just in general. This is one of the most impactful things to have been found out. The Cambridge Analytica scandal was a big deal. And for those that forgot, there were about 83 million users who had their information exposed that we know of, 83 million, that had their information and their data sold essentially to a company that used that data and that information for political gain, for political purposes. This was a big deal because this happened ahead of the 2016 presidential election. And we're not really sure exactly how it might have shifted or motivated people to vote in the 2016 election, but it remains one of those huge question marks that are kind of up in the air and a huge black mark on American democracy. I mean, American democracy is supposed to be like number one, right? It's supposed to be number one in the hood. Gee, we got this democracy thing perfected. Other democracies have to be like us. Well, this was a critical part of the democratic process, if you will, that was breached several years ago with when Cambridge Analytica sold that data to all these interested parties that wanted to know, hey, how often does a person click on a page that mentions Hillary Clinton's name? How often do those people who click on pages with Hillary Clinton's name, how often do they buy a certain type of product? And how can we advertise that product more as a way of boosting or hurting Hillary Clinton's chances of winning the election, right? Like, all this stuff was kind of connected in a sense. And Facebook still has not really been held accountable for that kind of thing. Mark Zuckerberg, CEO and super rich dude, went in front of Congress, I think several times at this point. He's been in front of Congress at least twice at this point. And effectively, Congress has been like, wait, what's the whole deal with this data thing? And they kind of get lost in that sauce. Another reason why we need younger representatives, but that's a separate conversation for later. Anyway, Cambridge Analytica was and still is a big deal. The fact that data can now easily be transferred from entity to entity to entity means that, again, your data is valuable. And I'm not saying that you have to keep your data close and never share any of your information, but you should realize that every piece of information that you share allows these companies. It's not about invading on your personal space. Nobody cares about you. No offense. Nobody cares about you personally, right? But they do care about getting close enough to understand people's patterns and how they can be manipulated. I'm talking about things that sound like mind control because it's really not too far off of it. But this is very real. This is no hypnosis, right? Data and information can describe large portions of us, not everything, but it can describe and it can get to large portions of us. And when we think about what our digital footprint, if you will, is online, that digital footprint tells a lot about how we in real life can be influenced on real issues. So this news over the weekend that maybe a lot of people didn't hear about, but this huge hack, if you will, the exposing of information of over a half a billion people who are on Facebook and their contact information on Facebook, it is still a big deal. Facebook is trying to push back and say, look, it's data that was scraped, a year or two ago, and it was kind of because people kind of have their information in the app already, and so we encourage you to be safer about that kind of thing, right? Trying to push the blame off onto other people. Facebook is big enough, and I think we've seen this at this point. Facebook is big enough. And other companies like this, it's not just Facebook, other social sites or those sites that use social elements as a way of connecting people. They're too big. But they've set the standard for how user interactions are online. Facebook is the king. And other companies, other big corporations are not trying to find ways to protect and to conserve your data because it's your right, right? These companies are not racing to the aid of the people and their individual civic rights as people. That's not what's happening here. These companies are racing to become more like Facebook. These companies can't wait to get a piece of your data, your information, how many times you call that favorite pizza spot of yours down the street. Because maybe they might want to slide in a pizza advertisement, yes, but they also know that politically they can maybe swing you along certain lines based upon what you know and what you don't know, what you think that, or what you say that you know and what you don't know. So just as a reminder, as we're moving rapidly into a digital empire, that's always constantly the conversation that we're having on this topic. Coronavirus has in many ways ushered us more quickly into that era where everything is digital, right? Less employees, less handing over of physical money, more investment in things like cryptocurrencies, in digital systems. That's just the way it was going to happen anyway, but it's happening a lot faster now. Data is currency, as Steph Humphrey says. Shout out to Steph Humphrey out there. Make sure you go follow her. She's chock full of great information on this very topic. I'll tag her in the comments because she knows a heck of a lot more about this stuff than I do. But she says it all the time. Data is currency, and it's okay if you are giving permissions, right? Because sometimes we want to be plugged into Twitter, we want to be plugged into Facebook, and to see how these things work. But just understand the value of what you're giving away when you accept those pesky permissions and things like that. All right, so tell me what you think in the comment section. Tell me what you think about all of this. I mean, you may be on Facebook listening to this right now. It's okay. They won't kick you off, I promise. But these, data is an important topic. It's not the sexy subject or anything else like that, but how we move online becomes tremendously important for us to know at least how these things are being tracked. What does that mean that you're being tracked? Does it mean somebody's following behind you? No, but your data could be used, for political purposes or something even more sinister. Who knows? Protect your data. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Let's get to the second story. The MLB AllStar Game over the weekend. It was announced, of course, that this was, I think, on Friday, that Major League Baseball, in response to Georgia's new voting laws, was going to remove the AllStar Game. Was going to change rather the location of the AllStar Game from Atlanta, which of course everyone knows is in Georgia, to somewhere else. They made the decision a few days ago that location was going to be Colorado, and this whole thing has turned into a mess. An opportunity for something big, sure, but as usual, a mess. This decision is catching heat from both sides of the aisle, and in my opinion, it's catching heat for good reason. Now, we know why people who are on a like conservative side of things don't like this decision from Major League Baseball. There's an easy sort of pinata to hit here if you're a conservative and you need a reason to hate what is going on right now in Georgia. It's simple, right? Like, you know, the Republican legislator in the state of Georgia are the ones that made the rule changes to their voting system down there in Atlanta, in Georgia, and the MLB is kind of doing this as a reaction. You got to stick up for your homies, right? Largely Republican state Senate that passed this. So this decision, which is kind of like a slap in the face to conservatives, of course conservatives are going to be against it. We know that. Boom, out of the way. But the other side of this, you know, the other side of this political spectrum, you know, they're kind of hurt by this too, right? Like Atlanta is one of the rare cities, and it's a big one at that, that is mostly African American. It's mostly Black. And so when you think about who really is hurt, as many people are aptly bringing up at this point, at this time, when you think about who's really hurt in this decision, it's many of the people that were anticipating income from All-Star Weekend. That's no longer going to come in now because the game is moved out of Atlanta to Colorado. So a lot of people are like, this is a mess. No one exactly likes the decision. So what the heck happened here? Because there's a few things to kind of pull from this. Why did Major League Baseball decide to do this? What was Rob Manfred, who is the commissioner of baseball, what exactly was his idea behind this? And I think I could see it. Just follow with me here for a second. I'd love to hear what you all think too. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this MLB moving the game from Atlanta to Colorado. But the way that I look at it, I think that Rob Manfred, commissioner of baseball, wanted Major League Baseball to be on the right side of history here. And what I mean by that is they wanted to show that they stood with the people here and that they stood with the right to vote. And that was evident because this is costing baseball a lot of money. Like, this is not a good financial decision for baseball, for Major League Baseball to switch the location of the All-Star Game, all the events and the gala that they had planned for this weekend, which is coming up in 2-3 months here, is now going to have to be shifted and changed to an entirely different city. The marketing, the advertising, I mean, everything behind this, the amount of money that Major League Baseball lost in this transaction is tremendous. So this isn't about money, right? But they did want to stand on the right side of history. Just last summer, we had protests in the streets. And one of the conversations that we had during those protests was that certain companies, they believed that they had a role in helping to affect what was happening in the street, right? Like, we could criticize somebody looting or whatever, who it was, and looting a Target, but what is Target really doing for the community? We had this kind of conversation about, like, where do big corporations and companies sort of fit in to ensuring that the people, have like basic rights and stuff. We wanted companies and big corporations, especially teams, sports teams, when sports finally returned under bubble circumstances and other things like that, we had this conversation like, what else can the teams behind these players who are kneeling or whatever else like that before the games, what can these teams do to support that? We wanted, as somebody just marked on the Instagram here, accountability, the word accountability. We wanted accountability from these companies and corporations. We know some of the players are willing to do it. So what's wrong with this, right? What's wrong with baseball saying, look, we want to stand in the, for the rights of the people? Even a part of their release, Major League Baseball's release, says this: Major League Baseball fundamentally supports voting rights for all Americans and opposes restrictions to the ballot box. It seems like a pretty open and shut case here. So why are people confused? Because the messaging on this is tremendously mixed. I mean, after all, I know we do want these big corporations, to get involved, but Major League Baseball, this is not a big win for Major League Baseball because they, as a company, as a big corporation, if you will, are out of touch with the exact needs of the people. I mean, just the very idea of a business and a corporation doesn't center around the things that we think it does. There's a lot of people that think that that Major League Baseball centers around the game of baseball, and therefore the players that play that sport, that's the centerpiece of the whole operation. That's what people think. But like many other American businesses, business rather, dollars and cents, that's the lifeblood. That's the center. If Major League Baseball had terrible baseball teams, terrible baseball players, but they were still able to recoup revenue and make a profit year after year after year, that's a success because it's a business. I don't care about the people on the field. So all of this kind of has to work in concert with each other, for businesses to succeed. And when it comes to human issues like this, right, the right to vote, and you look at a big corporation or a big company that tries to get involved, this is often how they get involved. They threaten you with their money or the power that they have to send their money from A to B. Major League Baseball says, we're going to make a difference. We're going to punish the state of Georgia by removing all that revenue that they were going to get from this All-Star game and moving it all the way out to Colorado. And you know what? At the end of the day, we as Major League Baseball are going to be celebrated for this because we did the right thing. We're on the right side of history now. We even took a financial loss, the thing that's quintessential to American business, the profit. We even accepted that there's going to be a loss of profit here just to move the game. You know why? Because the MLB stands with the people. That's not it. That ain't it, right? We live in a capitalist society, not to get too Marxist here or too deep anybody here, but we live in a capitalist society. It's all about the almighty dollar. And those that have the most dollars in this country, that's like the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rule, right? And many companies and corporations have been allowed to maybe not make the rules, but certainly set the tone about the rules, for sure. That's who runs this country. That's what runs this country. And so if it felt like that Major League Baseball's decision to move this All-Star game didn't really move the needle on the conversation about voting rights in Georgia or anywhere else, you're not alone. This is very much so a political move. And sure, I'd like to put pressure on legislators to do the right thing when it comes to the vote. I don't think that that's on the backs of businesses and corporations to financially pressure other people into doing it. It's kind of like if you found out that your deadbeat dad who started hanging out with you a few months ago was doing so because someone was paying him money to do so. It's like, oh, come on, Dad. Like, that's not cool. You might as well have not hung out with me at all. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about this decision, right? Like, it's like, if it's about the money and if you're utilizing the money as a means to do the right thing, then it just doesn't feel right to me. But what this will serve as an opportunity to do is fodder for some of the culture wars that we've talked about on this show and others as well. The culture wars involve the party. It's a political strategy, rather by the party that's not in power to just sort of throw eggs at the wall, at the leadership rather, and hope that they look bad. It's a great chance for conservatives to claim that the sky is falling because cancel culture is taking over the left, and it's going to be Democrats' opportunity to say that Georgia, had this coming because they did it to themselves with their own voting restrictions and things like that. That's all this is, right? We're going to be arguing about this for the next couple of months until the game comes. It's a smokescreen, my friends. Smokescreen. Why do I say that? Because at the end of the day, it becomes absolutely vital to understand why you want to vote. Why you want to vote. Because if you understand that it's not a trend, it's not a political ploy, it's not something you're doing because all your friends are doing it, it's not something you're doing because Coca-Cola supports your favorite candidate, it's not what you're doing this for. There's a need, a clear and evident need for newer, stronger, better, faster, whatever leadership. We need that. The need is great. And the vote is a simple passageway to that political reality. It's not everything, but it's a political passageway to that reality. And folks, if folks rather understand why it's important to vote, not being yelled at in the weeks prior to an election and saying, if you don't vote, you're letting down your ancestors, things like that. I'm talking about understanding, having a fundamental understanding to what your role is in the change. That is necessary, and it can't happen without you. I feel like PBS, So Smokescreen, because no matter what is happening or what's going on in your state with the vote, ultimately it's your decision to get involved, and that will be the biggest factor and the biggest decision to impact the chances of you being able to cast a vote. As legislators, we know what they have a responsibility to do, and that's make it easier to vote. Open up access. We still want a verification and identification. Of course, we want those things, a validation of our elections. We want them to be fair, no fraud, etc. Of course. But if we get too deep into the political smoke screens like the AllStar Game, how it's going to be used over the next couple of months to sort of pull people left and right, then we're going to lose the idea of why it's important to be involved in the process at all. So let's get to some of the comments. About all I have to add on this. Let's see what other people have added in. Native Man says, so the question these days is, how do you have strategic boycotting? That's an interesting question, and it's a question that's oftentimes discussed in Black circles and Black radio, Black podcasts, and things like this. I love this question because strategically boycotting, I think these days does mean something different. I would like to focus on how we can apply real pressure to real people. I think in these situations, there's such a separation between what our representatives are doing and what they're motivated by and what drives them to do what they do every day and what the people need. There's a huge gap between those two things. And so when we discuss ways of strategically boycotting, as Native Man comments here, we have to consider what our impact is actually going to do. If we're going to not buy Goya beans anymore, what is the real impact of that? How's Goya beans doing, by the way? Has anyone checked in with them in a while? These are sort of the old ways of protesting, and I think that they are noble, and I think that the honor of these kinds of protests, like the Goya beans protests, very important to note and mark in history. But if we're talking about a better and more effective strategy moving forward, we have to figure out, kind of what hurts and where it hurts, and not just hurt people, but replace them, get them out of there. That's what I think strategic boycotting ought to be more focused in. If you want a more, focused answer, getting people out, not applying pressure to those that are there, getting those that are there out. So that's what I think can go really far. Let's go to the next comment. Jovan Alford comments in. Make sure you check out his podcast as well, TSL Podcast. He says, no lie, I was surprised to see MLB make this decision. I would have thought the NBA would make a move like this. Actually, the WNBA thought they would have made a move like this. Now, this was interesting because obviously the owner of the WNBA, part owner of the WNBA team in Atlanta, was running for Senate. She didn't win. She didn't even have the support of her team and her players. That ended up being a pretty impactful sort of thing that the WNBA players did. And Jovan, we've had conversations, sorry about that. We've had conversations about how we wish more athletes kind of had the sort of courage that the WNBA players have had, going against, in some cases, they're the same team owner that they played for. So I was a little bit surprised that it was MLB to make this decision, but they did have this. The ball was in their court for something like this. The All-Star Game was in Atlanta. And if it was in another place, I wonder what Major League Baseball would have done. Let's say it's in Baltimore, right? Just throwing it out there. If Major League Baseball's All-Star Game is in Baltimore, this voting rights affliction, so to speak, happens in Georgia, I don't think that Major League Baseball even releases a statement. I could be wrong here, but I don't even think they released a statement. But they had a dog in this fight. They had the All-Star Game happening in Atlanta, Georgia. There were eyes that were on this just a few years ago. I think it was in North Carolina. They had, and Jovan, you could probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think in the tournament, in the NCAA basketball tournament, they had one of the hubs there moved to a different location because of the transgender bathroom laws in that state. It might have been North Carolina. It might have been another state. But either way, there's now sort of a precedent for having a big All-Star Game that you could possibly move to another state or to another place if indeed something is going on there politically that these leagues don't like. These leagues are privately owned. They don't have to move them. They don't have to do any of this. But they make these decisions anyway, and it ends up having a profound impact on the conversation itself. So I was surprised to see that Major League Baseball would take action, but at the end of the day, they do have some stake in this. they do have a dog in this fight, and I think this was kind of they thought that this was their way of making a huge impact. When I don't really think that they're going, it didn't really hit, it didn't really land, so to speak, the way that they thought it would. Now, I would like to see Major League Baseball engaging in more, sort of not just programs, but sort of create, if they need to, creating programs around expanding that right to vote, right? Like they've joined, and part of this press release was that they had joined in 2020. MLB became first professional sports league to join the Nonpartisan Civic Alliance. So they tout that as a part of this, this press release, which is great. I'm glad that they're the first league to go ahead and do that. But as I mentioned earlier, as a business, it's really hard to envision how a company and a corporation that has a bottom line outside of the people. It's hard to see, it's hard to envision how that entity can then help the people on a real human level. So those are things that I think that we got to watch out for as well. All right. So I think that is all the comments that we have. I appreciate the folks for tuning in. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention before I got out of here. So I'm going on vacation, some personal news in 30 days. In 30 days, I'm excited. So I'm definitely going to be trying an all vegetarian diet for the next 30 days, folks. I'm kind of excited for those that have switched from a meat-based diet to an all vegetarian diet. I'd love to hear your experiences. I'm very experienced, so to speak, with vegetarian food, but it's something that I'm going to do, try and get in shape, so to speak, in 30 days. And it's not just those 30 days, but it is a unique challenge to myself. So I'm excited about that. What's going to be kind of cool about that is I always talk about parkour, of course. They sponsor the Words Parkour gear right now. The cool thing is the parkour is going to help me get in shape for this. I'm going to take the next 30 days. I've set some personal goals of my own. I want to do 50,000 steps every single week. So that includes all activities, me playing basketball, working out, whatever else like that I might do. 50,000 steps in a week averages out to about 8,000 a day, Monday through Friday, and a little bit less than that on the weekend. So that's a big part of it. Changing my diet to exclusively vegetarian foods for the next 30 days is the other part. So I hope you all can kind of keep up with the journey. We're going to be doing different challenges and stuff like that. And most certainly I'll be using my Parkour Plus membership. You can get yours for free right now. Trialparkourtherapy.com. They got ab challenges, push-up challenges, basketball challenges, all different types of stuff. And coming up a little bit later this year, we'll be giving away some merch for an abs challenge that we're going to be doing over the summertime. So make sure you are getting you all's bodies ready. I'm excited for that. We're doing a 360 this year. 360 this season, I'm sorry, on a Nichols worth. So thanks everybody for joining me. I'll be back on Friday for real this time. I'll be back on Friday. And shout out to everyone for the birthday wishes. I appreciate you guys. And we'll see you next time.